Hi, tonight I'm going to talk about how I price things. I thought it'd be interesting to do a little series on what a dealer does. And pricing is probably the last thing I do out of four, but it's probably the most interesting. Now when there's so much access to material and pricing comparisons, people wonder why a dealer is needed at all. I sometimes wonder the same thing. A dealer does four things. He looks at merchandise. I spend a lot of my day doing that. Secondly, I have to identify and authenticate the material because I don't want it to come back for being incomplete or not what it's represented to be. Thirdly, and most interesting to me personally, is doing the research to describe what the item did in its own time or why it's important nowadays. And then lastly, how I get a feel for what it's worth. So tonight I'm going to start off with the last, how I price things, and that's going to follow. We're going to play a little game here, and you're invited to join in. The game's called What's It Worth? This is an album of reproductions of costume and set designs after Picasso's ballet Le Tricorne. It was published in 1920. By Paul Rosenberg, and they're all loose as issued. I've done all the work and have determined that it's complete. It's got chain of provenance. It's as it should be. Now I need to determine what I'm going to sell it for. This is the least intuitive thing I do. It's most research oriented, and it's based, just like real estate, on comparisons, even though sometimes they're very, very hard to determine. As I've mentioned, I've got tons of dealers' catalogs and old auction records, and they won't really help me. I need to look at comparisons in the recent last 5 or 10 years. Over the last decade, pricing information has greatly gone to the web, and that works just fine when the material is available. It's not so easy for early printed books, but let's let that go for another time. On the web, there's one other copy. This is an adall.com of the album, seemingly the same collection I have. And the price being asked is 16,500 euro. Well, that's great. That's more than I paid for it, but it may be worth it. I just don't know. And it's always best to look for more than one comparison anyhow. So we'll have to go to other databases. This little gizmo is a compact flash containing a database of thousands of records of prices realized at auctions from 1975 to the present. And I should point out that the actual book auction records go back well over a century, and they came out yearly, and sometimes you need to consult them if a book hasn't been at auction for decades or so. Well, let's go look at the data. This is 1980 for $800. The buying power of the dollar was great at that time. I can't quite translate it because there was other factors. Very few American collectors were at that time interested in modern illustrated books from France. That has changed now, so more and more people have come into the market. Let's go to another one. This is 1992, Swan Gallery in New York. This brought $8,000. On many occasions I have to go and take a look at the physical auction catalogs for whatever auction house. They're all available at a major research library. These things go back decades and decades, and even that may not sometimes tell me what it is I really need to know. Now here's another one at 4,500. That's 1995. Seemingly a little bit of a pattern here from
$8,000, $4,500, $5,600, but let's look at them in more detail. And what about this? And what about this guy for $11,000? Well, that says that there's 32 reproductions, Paris 1920, but this is one of only 50 copies with an original signed etching, an extra suite of plates, and it's bound by Pierre Legrand, a very important French designer, binding highly collected there. In 1999, it might be very possible for someone from France to get the Sotheby's catalog and bid on it and take it back home. Now, here's the last one that we see in the auction records. That's less than a decade ago, $5,600. One plate with tears increasing its upper left-hand corner, but it seems to be in pretty good condition. I checked the Swan catalog, but anyhow, we're starting to see a pattern of somewhere between $4,000 to $5,000 to $6,000 to $8,000. That's not too big a spread. When you go to auctions, you sometimes see a price range. Anyhow, okay, now there's one thing we have forgotten. Now, what I've forgotten is that the Picasso book was published in French. He's European. Most of the collectors of Picasso ballet material are also in Europe, but there's many, many here now. Anyhow, so this is the umbrella auction site, auction.fr, which includes almost all French auctions and also many European. And then, since I subscribe to it, I'm able to get prices realized. And there's 3 of them. It was the year 2000, and it brought 7,622 euro in Paris, Binoche. The next one auctioned in 1998, same auction house in Paris. This one brought 12,196 euro, a lot more. Let's try to understand why. Well, we see, you may not be able to see, but right at the bottom of the page it says its provenance was Leonid Messine. So it was a very important person in the ballet world, and that in itself would explain the difference in price. Here's the last one on the French auction result site. This was also 1998, and it estimated to bring 5,000 French francs, and whatever that means, and it actually sold for 6,000 euro plus change. And they're all the same editions, the same as mine. So depending what the euro was worth in 1998, I think that's when it first came into use. It was around 120, it went down to 80, so you have to look that up. Anyhow, one gets the feeling from looking at all these records that it probably is worth on today's market someplace between $7,000 and $8,000, and that's if it's in the same condition. That's not rocket science. It's a lot of data, and it's probably the best that I can do in terms of establishing a fair market evaluation of what this book should sell for. I can price it less, or I can price it more. There's no law in the land that prevents me. But if someone says, well, Gordon, where did you get the price that you got? I can just go and show them exactly what I'm showing you. So it takes some of the magic out of valuation, but at least it's real.